Space is full of wonders. Galaxies, stars, planets, nebulae, and cosmic structures so massive they break the limits of human imagination. But beyond all of that, there exists something far stranger, far darker, and far more mysterious than anything we have ever discovered. Something so big, so empty, and so silent that astronomers still struggle to understand how it formed or why it exists at all. A place where the universe itself seems to have taken a pause and left behind nothing. This is the void that could fit 200 Milky Ways, a region of space so enormous that if you placed the Milky Way galaxy inside it, you would still have room for 199 more. No stars, no planets, no gas, no dust, not even dark matter. Only unimaginable emptiness stretching for billions of light years. Scientists call it a supervoid, but this one breaks every rule, every model, and every expected pattern of how the universe should behave. It is too large, too empty, too perfect, and too old to fit comfortably within the standard laws of cosmic evolution. Its existence forces us to ask questions that border on the philosophical, the terrifying, and the unknown. How can something so unimaginably big be so completely empty? Why does the cosmic microwave background show a cold imprint exactly where this void is located? Did something erase matter from that region? Or did nothing ever form there in the first place? Some scientists believe this void is evidence of cosmic inflation gone wrong, a flaw in the universe's earliest expansion. Others think it may hint at parallel universes, where another universe collided with ours and pushed matter away, leaving behind a cosmic scar. And a few, more daring theories whisper that it could be the signature of something beyond physics, a structure created not by natural processes, but by something with intention. As we journey through this story, we will explore the science, the mysteries, and the chilling possibilities behind this impossibly large void. We will travel through the deepest regions of the cosmos where galaxies vanish, temperatures drop, and the universe itself seems to thin out. We will follow astronomers who accidentally stumbled across this cosmic anomaly and the theories that have tried and failed to explain it. Because in a universe filled with trillions of galaxies and unimaginable energies, the most frightening thing of all is a place where nothing exists. A place large enough to swallow 200 Milky Ways without a trace. A place that forces us to confront one of the oldest fears humanity has ever had, the fear of the unknown. There are places in the universe that remind us how small we really are. Galaxies stretching like rivers of fire, nebulae blooming like cosmic gardens, and clusters of stars swirling in patterns older than Earth itself. But there is one region so unsettling, hollow in the universe so enormous that it could swallow 200 Milky Way galaxies and still have room to breathe. To most, this is just a strange fact buried in scientific papers. But to those who have stood at the edge of it, pilots, researchers, and the handful of explorers who dared to measure its silence, this void is something else entirely. Something alive in its emptiness. The universe is not uniform. It is not evenly filled with stars and worlds and glowing clouds of gas. It is a web, a cosmic latticework of filaments and gaps, strands where galaxies cluster tightly and valleys where almost nothing resides. But this void, this cavern of nothingness, is not just a gap. It is a wound, a region so profoundly empty that even the brightest galaxies fade into whispers at its boundary. Scientists first noticed it when they were mapping the cosmic microwave background, the ancient radiation left over from the birth of the universe. A cold spot, unusually colder than the rest, appeared on the map. At first, no one believed it. Instruments glitch, data misfires, sensors freeze. But then it reappeared, again and again, a cold fingerprint on the oldest light we have ever measured. When researchers finally pointed deep space telescopes toward that region, they found almost nothing. No bright galaxies, no clusters, just a vast, silent gulf. They estimated its scale, hundreds of millions of light-years across, enough emptiness to dwarf every structure humanity has ever known. For reference, the Milky Way, our entire home, would look like a dust particle floating inside it. And there, at the border of this cosmic abyss, is where the first-person part of our story begins. I was part of the Helios mapping program, one of the few missions allowed to approach the void's boundary. Not to enter it, we had strict orders not to cross, but to understand it from the outside. Even then, the journey felt like driving toward the edge of a cliff you can't fully see. The deeper we went, the more the universe seemed to fade. Distant galaxies began to distort, their colors bending in ways our navigation AI struggled to stabilize. And then came the silence. Not the kind you hear in a forest late at night. Not the kind inside a sealed spacecraft. This silence felt conscious, as if the void were swallowing the background hum of existence itself. Scientific instruments reacted first. Our gamma sensors dropped. X-ray detection fell next. Even neutrino bursts, normally constant from distant cosmic events, began thinning out. It was as if the void weakened everything that approached it, like a gravitational emptiness tugging at the universe's lifelines. At one point, our ship's commander stood beside me at the observation window. The stars ahead looked diluted, like they were dissolving into darkness. He whispered, "It looks like the universe just stops." And in that moment, none of us could disagree. Back on Earth, scientists were developing theories to explain this strange chasm in the cosmos. Some believed it was simply a naturally occurring supervoid, a region where matter never gathered during the universe's early formation. Others believed something more dramatic happened. Perhaps a colossal black hole once resided there, devouring everything around it before evaporating. Or maybe, as a few daring theorists suggested, this void was the imprint of a collision between universes, an ancient bruise left behind when another reality brushed against ours during the Big Bang. But the strangest ideas came from the exploration logs, and that includes ours. Approaching the boundary did something to time. Not enough for the public to hear about it, but enough that mission logs recorded discrepancies. Our onboard clock shifted by a fraction of a second compared to Earth's timestamps, as if time itself bent differently near the void's edge. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. A cosmic hiccup. And that small shift led some to believe that the void wasn't just empty, but warped, like a pocket of distorted space-time, a region where the laws of physics were stretched thin. The deeper we scanned, the more anomalies piled up. Radiation levels dropped to nearly non-existent, cosmic dust became sparse, matter in general seemed to avoid the region. It was as if something had vacuumed the universe clean in that direction. During the second week of our mission, we tested long-range pulses, shooting beams of light into the void. Under normal circumstances, these beams reflect off distant matter, dust, gas, faint galaxies, giving us a sense of distance. But inside the void, the beams just vanished. No reflection, no scatter, as if the light was being swallowed by something invisible.
We didn't report that part publicly. The captain ordered additional readings. Our sensors began picking up faint gravitational fluctuations, small waves, almost like echoes. The universe is full of gravitational waves from black hole mergers, neutron stars colliding, and galaxy interactions. But these waves didn't match anything recorded before. They were too smooth, too uniform, like the trembling of something massive and hidden. Something that wasn't moving, but trembling. By day 14, our crew had grown uneasy. Something about the void triggered a deep, instinctive fear. Several of us experienced the same recurring dream, drifting alone in the void, unable to see or hear anything, but feeling watched by the emptiness. Rationally, we knew it was stress and isolation. Emotionally, none of us were convinced. When we finally turned the ship around, the relief on board was palpable. The stars grew brighter behind us. Instrument readings normalized. Even the tiny background noise of the universe, neutrinos, cosmic rays, radiation, returned to acceptable levels. And then something else happened. The moment we reached a safe distance, our navigation AI caught an anomaly behind us. For a fraction of a second, data spiked. A gravitational dip, then another, like something inside the void shifted slightly. It was the only moment I ever saw the captain genuinely afraid. He said, "Log it, and don't mention it outside mission control." To this day, no one knows what caused that disturbance. Was it natural? A random fluctuation in space-time? Or did the void react to our presence, disturbed by our small intrusion into its domain? Scientists analyzing our data came up with several models. One suggested that the void was not just empty, but expanding, slowly pushing matter out at its borders. Another suggested that the void contained trace amounts of exotic energy, the kind that could warp space-time in ways we barely understand. A few, of course, reached for the more dramatic explanations. Maybe the void was the remnant of a collapsed universe, a region where everything simply faded away. But none of those theories addressed the feeling we all shared, a feeling so hard to describe, yet so universally experienced by our crew that mission psychologists flagged it in the final report. The sensation that the void was aware. Not alive, not conscious in any human sense, but aware of us, aware of its own emptiness and the fact that something foreign, our ship, had dared approach its border. The void doesn't pull like a black hole. It doesn't shine like a star. It simply exists, vast, silent, inescapable. A missing piece of the universe so large that it challenges the very idea of cosmic structure. The fact that so much nothingness can exist is both fascinating and terrifying. It suggests something about the universe we rarely consider. Maybe structure is the exception and emptiness is the rule. Maybe everything we know, galaxies, stars, planets, is a tiny decoration on the surface of a much deeper darkness. When we returned to Earth, reporters wanted dazzling stories of discovery. They expected tales of alien signals or lost galaxies or unknown.
The strangest thing about returning from the void's edge wasn't the physical adjustment. It wasn't the familiar glow of the Milky Way returning to its usual brilliance, or the satisfaction of hearing the ship's systems hum again with full signal strength. No. The strangest thing was how normal everything looked. How ordinary. How completely unaware the rest of the universe seemed to be of the impossible darkness we had just left behind. For the first few days after our mission, I couldn't stop thinking about that. Stars burned, nebulae shimmered, galaxies spun with their usual cosmic choreography, as if the universe didn't care, or didn't notice, that a hole big enough to swallow 200 Milky Ways was sitting out there, radiating coldness deeper than the cosmic background itself. I think that was the first sign something had changed inside me. Before the mission, I had believed emptiness was just absence, a lack of matter, a vacuum, a space waiting to be filled. But the void wasn't absence, it was presence. A vast, dominant presence that exerted itself not through force, but by silence. The more I reflected on the experience, the more I realized how deeply the void had affected the entire crew, even those who refused to admit it. One night, weeks after returning, I received a message from one of our navigators, Torres. He simply wrote, "Do you still dream of it?" I didn't reply because I didn't need to. The answer was yes, and I knew he already knew that. The dreams weren't dramatic, not nightmares, not visions of destruction. They were emptier than that. I would find myself drifting alone in an infinite blackness, unable to see my own hands, unable to sense motion or sound. And the strangest part was that the dreams didn't feel like dreams. They felt like memories, as if something in the void had imprinted itself on my mind, as if it were reminding me, night after night, that I had trespassed into a silence meant to remain untouched. During our debriefings, psychologists suggested it was a form of sensory trauma, the result of staring too long into a region of such extreme emptiness that the human brain, designed to interpret patterns and meaning, panicked quietly inside itself. Maybe they were right, or maybe they were comforting themselves with the simplest explanation available. The scientists, on the other hand, weren't so quick to dismiss the odd sensations. They wanted every detail of the mission, every sensor reading, every visual distortion, every piece of data from our cosmic ray logs. Over and over, they asked about the moment the gravitational fluctuations appeared behind our ship. They analyzed that anomaly more times than I can count and still came up empty-handed. Publicly, they called it an unexplained variance. Privately, they admitted they had no idea what caused it. But the investigation didn't stop there. When we returned to Earth, the astronomical community had already begun launching new surveys of the void. Observatories around the world pointed their telescopes toward that vast region, hoping to catch new clues. What they found only deepened the mystery. The void wasn't stable. Not fully. Certain parts appeared slightly darker over time, slightly colder, slightly more distant, as if the void was not a fixed structure, but a living scar in the cosmos, slowly shifting, settling, or expanding. No one could prove anything, of course. The universe is too big, the timescales too enormous, and our tools too primitive to definitively track something on that scale. But the observational hints were undeniable. Something about the void was different from when we first detected it. It didn't behave like empty space. One evening, a senior astrophysicist from our mission pulled me aside and said something I hadn't expected to hear from a scientist grounded so deeply in empirical discipline. She said, "Whatever is inside that void, it isn't nothing." She paused as if afraid to continue. It might be less than nothing. Her meaning didn't hit me until days later. Space isn't empty. Even the quietest region contains virtual particles, radiation, dust, gravity fields, and the faint afterglow of the Big Bang. But if the void contained less than that, if it contained a deficit of quantum activity, then it wasn't just a hole. It was a deviation from reality, a place where physics thinned, a place where the universe behaved like a sheet stretched too far, pulled so tightly that it began to tear. The next twist came months later, when the Helios data analysts finished processing our long-range light pulses, the beams we fired into the void that vanished without reflection. The results were troubling.
Under normal circumstances, even distant cosmic dust scatters a small percentage of the light, sending faint echoes back. But in the void, the light wasn't scattered. It was absorbed. Completely. That should have been impossible. Unless some form of exotic field or unknown medium, was interacting with the photons, something invisible, silent, and vast. The report was quietly classified, but not before a few details leaked to the scientific community. A rumor spread that the light vanished not because it dissipated, but because the void has a lower index of reality. A phrase so strange that people initially assumed it was a joke, but no one was laughing inside the research centers. Meanwhile, life on Earth carried on. People worked, commuted, scrolled through their feeds, unaware that scientists were losing sleep trying to understand a hollow in the universe, so large that calling it a void felt like an understatement. It was more like a cosmic omission, a region where the universe had forgotten to finish its sentence. I tried to return to normal life too. I really did. But the memories kept pulling me back. The distortion of starlight at the void's edge, the silence that felt physical, the sense of being watched by something that wasn't alive. Eventually, I started visiting observatories again, not as part of my job. I had stepped away from the official program, but privately, quietly, as if trying to reassure myself the universe still made sense. Every time I looked at images of the void, my chest tightened with the same uneasy mix of awe and dread. One night, while reviewing data with a colleague at a small mountain observatory, we detected something interesting. A very faint gravitational wave originating near the void. It wasn't strong enough to be a black hole merger. It wasn't sharp enough to be a neutron-star collision. It was more like a pulse, a long, low, slow disturbance, a ripple in the emptiness. The pattern repeated again 2 weeks later, and then, strangely, a third time. We reported the findings to the main research team, but even they didn't know what to make of it. Voids aren't supposed to generate gravitational waves. They're supposed to be passive, not active. Yet something inside that abyss was shifting, breathing, vibrating on a scale too subtle for the public to notice, but too consistent for scientists to ignore. There were theoretical models, distorted space-time, collapsing quantum fields, remnants of primordial fluctuations, but none fully matched the data. The patterns were too rhythmic, too evenly spaced, almost intentional. I tried not to think about the dreams, but they intensified. Now I didn't just drift in the darkness, I sensed movement around me. Not shapes, not beings, just the pressure of something enormous shifting slowly, like a continent-sized creature turning in its sleep. Of course, I knew it was just my mind stitching fears into meanings. That's what the brain does. But a part of me wondered, was it only fear? Or was it memory? Was the void truly empty? Or had we simply failed to understand its language? The next revelation arrived unexpectedly during a conference in Geneva. A physicist presented a new simulation of cosmic expansion, one that incorporated updated data from recent surveys. When the simulation ran across the screen, something became clear. The void influenced the surrounding galaxies, not through gravity, but through absence. It created a kind of pressure, a negative gravitational pull, pushing matter away from its center. The implication was shocking. The void wasn't static. It wasn't dormant. It was expanding. Slowly. Quietly. Subtly. The room fell silent when the simulation ended. It was the kind of silence that didn't belong in a hall full of scientists, a silence that felt uncomfortable, almost frightened. One researcher finally whispered, "If it keeps expanding, what happens in 1 billion years?" No one answered, because the truth was unsettling. If the void continued growing, even slowly, it could reshape the cosmic web, push galaxy clusters apart, thin the universe, change its structure in ways we were only beginning to understand. Later that night, as I walked back to my hotel, I couldn't shake a single thought, one that had never occurred to me until that moment. Maybe the void wasn't a flaw in the universe. Maybe it was the universe's natural state. Maybe everything else, stars, galaxies, life, was the...
The third day inside the void felt different. The crew couldn't explain it, but something in the unseen currents of space had changed. It wasn't dramatic, not yet, just a shift, the way the air feels before a distant storm. A silence that becomes too silent, a stillness that feels almost watchful. Helios II drifted through it slowly, its engines humming against a backdrop of infinite darkness. Space outside the ship had lost its familiar depth. There were no stars, no glimmers, no galaxies to anchor the eye. The void was an ocean without a horizon, and the deeper the ship sailed, the more distorted their instruments became. Light twisted like a slow-turning current, and shadows formed where nothing solid existed. Captain Aaron Salant stood at the front viewport, staring into a darkness so thick it almost felt textured, like something ancient pressed against the edges of vision. No one spoke for a long time. The void had that effect. It drained unnecessary words, leaving only breath and heartbeat. Even the crew's movements changed. They walked slower, spoke softer, not out of fear, but instinct, as if raising their voices in this place would disturb something that was better left resting. The rhythmic pulses continued, stronger now, clearer. Every 9 hours the ship felt a faint vibration, a gentle quiver in its structure, like a tide brushing against its hull. It was not mechanical, not environmental. The engineers checked every system. Everything was normal on the ship. The disturbance came from the void. On Earth, scientists watched the pulse data in disbelief. The waves had grown synchronized, not random, not chaotic, but timed with a precision that didn't exist in natural cosmic processes. Dr. Elise Marin analyzed the frequencies again and again. The rhythm wasn't similar to a heartbeat. It was a heartbeat. The waveform followed a rise and fall pattern identical to biological rhythms, scaled to cosmic size. When she reported this, no one wanted to believe it. How could something that spanned 200 Milky Ways behave like a living system? But the data remained stubborn, unchanging. Something inside the void was pulsing with a pattern too structured to be coincidence. Back aboard Helios II, the crew began noticing subtle changes inside the ship. The internal lighting seemed dimmer, though no power fluctuations were recorded. Sound traveled differently. Footsteps echoed more softly. Voices carried farther down the corridors. Even the temperature felt cooler, though environmental controls reported stable conditions. It was as if the void slowly replaced the familiar physics the crew had always known with a new set of rules. Not hostile, just different. Dr. Jalen Rhee spent hours examining the gravitational readings. The deeper they went, the stranger the numbers became. Gravity didn't act as a single force. It fluctuated in smooth waves, rising and falling so gently that the crew felt only the faintest sense of swaying, like a ship floating on calm waters. Space inside the void wasn't flat. It wasn't curved. It was fluid. The realization was breathtaking. The void wasn't empty space. It was a medium, like water or gas, a cosmic ocean shaped by forces unknown. And the Helios II was drifting through it, weightless and small. During the fourth pulse cycle, something new happened. For the first time since entering the void, sensors picked up a directional change. The pulse didn't expand in all directions equally. It came from somewhere deeper. A point. A source. It was faint, almost impossible to measure, but it was there. The crew stared at the display in silence. Beyond the swirling distortions, beyond the silent waves, beyond the invisible currents, something was inside the void. Something large, something old, something hidden by a darkness thicker than any vacuum in the universe. Captain Aaron made the decision without hesitation. Helios II adjusted course. They moved toward the source. The ship glided forward, engines burning at low output to preserve stability. The void responded immediately.
The distortions around the ship shifted, bending inward in spirals. They weren't dangerous, but they were intentional, as if the void acknowledged the ship's direction. The deeper they entered, the more the crew felt a sensation they couldn't quite describe. Not fear, not pressure. Something else. A sense of presence. A feeling of being observed, not with eyes, but with the fabric of space itself. During the next pulse, the entire ship trembled slightly, and the lights flickered for the briefest moment. The pulse passed through them like a wave of cold wind, even though the temperature hadn't dropped. Several crew members reported hearing a faint whisper again, softer this time, almost harmonious. When the recordings were reviewed, nothing appeared in the audio logs. Yet everyone heard the same thing. A low, distant hum, like a voice trying to speak across a billion-year chasm. On Earth, the pulse waves produced a gravitational anomaly never recorded before. Space-time rippled subtly across a nearby galaxy cluster. The distortion was large enough to register on distant telescopes. The void wasn't just affecting its immediate surroundings, it was sending waves across the cosmic fabric itself. As the crew approached the pulse's source, an unexpected phenomenon emerged. For the first time since entering the void, a faint glow appeared ahead, not from stars, but from a distortion so strong it bent what little scattered radiation existed inside the void. It illuminated the darkness like a ghostly curtain, a shimmering veil. No one aboard Helios II had ever seen anything like it. The glow didn't radiate, it shimmered, as though it were a boundary, or a membrane. A frontier between the known and something beyond it. The ship slowed, drifting closer, every sensor strained to read the structure. It wasn't solid, it wasn't gas, it wasn't plasma. It was a field, a gravitational gradient shaped into a thin, rippling sheet that stretched across the void like a cosmic veil. Behind it, they sensed movement. Not physical movement, but gravitational shifting. Slow, rhythmic, like the rise and fall of a giant tide. The pulses came from beyond the veil. The source was on the other side. For the first time since the mission began, the crew felt true fear. Not panic, but primal fear. The kind humanity felt when staring into the unknown depths of a cavern, not knowing whether something waited in the darkness. Yet just as the fear took hold, a wave of awe washed over them. The veil was beautiful, ethereal, elegant, a naturally impossible cosmic structure sculpted by forces older than creation. Even the scientists watching on Earth fell silent. The universe had never shown anything like this. Captain Aaron broke the silence with a single, steady breath. We go forward. No one argued, no one had to. Humanity had come too far to turn back. The engines engaged, slow and controlled, guiding Helios II toward the shimmering veil. The ship drifted closer, the glow reflecting faintly on the hull, the void growing darker behind them. The next pulse came, stronger, closer, clearer. It passed through the ship like a wave of soundless thunder, and for one brief moment, every screen flickered with the same impossible image. A faint silhouette, massive and distant, moving in the darkness behind the veil. The image vanished instantly. No recording captured it. But every person aboard saw the same thing. A shape so large it dwarfed entire galaxies. A shape that moved. A shape that pulsed. And with that, they realized the void was not just a place. It was a presence. Something older than the universe, waiting behind the veil. And the crew of Helios II had just crossed the point of no return.
By the time everything stopped, the sky's messages, the trembling earth, the fractures glowing from somewhere beneath the world, I realized something terrifying. Nothing had truly ended. It had only paused. The universe, whatever part of it was watching me, had retreated into a silence so complete it felt intentional, like an inhale before speaking, like something waiting for me to understand the pieces it had scattered in front of me. The red cloud shaped like an eye,
the crack in the ground glowing with an unnatural pulse, the word prepare, the voice that wasn't a voice whispering, "It has begun." These weren't random events. They were steps, a sequence, as if I had been forced onto a path that wasn't meant for a human to walk. And now, at the end of this chapter of my life, I finally accept what I refused to believe. We are not observers in this universe. We are participants, unwilling, unprepared, blind to the structures hidden in the dark between galaxies and deaf to the signals buried beneath our own planet, until they decide to reveal themselves. The void that could swallow 200 Milky Ways is not just an empty space. It's a stage, a doorway, a place where ancient forces drift like shadows, waiting for movement, waiting for life, waiting for us. And for reasons I still don't understand, it looked at me first. But this is not the end of the story. Because when the earth stopped shaking, when the sky went quiet, when the universe closed its eye, I felt something new. Not fear, not confusion, expectation. As though the cosmos was waiting for me to take the next step, to ask the next question, to search for the next boundary. Because whatever has begun hasn't finished. The silence isn't peace, it's a countdown. And when it ends, the void will open again, bigger, closer, hungrier. And I will be there, not because I choose to be, but because the universe has already chosen me. This was only the beginning. The moment the Helios 2 crossed the shimmering veil, the universe changed. There was no flash of light, no violent jolt, no tearing sensation. Instead, the transition felt impossible in its simplicity, a gentle ripple passing through the hull, like stepping through a thin sheet of cool mist. Every surface in the ship shivered, but quietly, almost politely, as if the veil itself allowed them to pass. Then the darkness on the other side unfolded. It wasn't the same darkness they had crossed for days. This was deeper, heavier, layered like the shadows of an untouched ocean. Space felt thicker, as if the vacuum was no longer empty, but filled with a substance too fine to see, too ancient to categorize. Their instruments went silent for 3 full seconds, every screen blank, every reading zeroed out, as if the laws of physics needed a moment to decide what form they would take here. Then the displays flickered back, and the crew stared, stunned. They were no longer drifting through a void. They were inside something. Massive gravitational structures surrounded them, invisible but unmistakable. Their sensors registered waves and currents like the tides of a colossal sea. Gravity flowed like wind, bending space in slow spirals that twisted and stretched in every direction. The void had depth now, texture, motion. Captain Aaron leaned forward. "Report." Dr. Ree's voice trembled despite his training. "Space-time density has increased by a factor of 30. Gravity is fluctuating symmetrically. This is a controlled environment. Something is stabilizing it." Controlled. The word hit everyone with the weight of a revelation. This place wasn't a natural phenomenon. It wasn't chaos. It was architecture. A cosmic structure so vast it could contain 200 Milky Ways and still have room to breathe. The Helios 2 continued forward, carried by a gentle gravitational drift. For the first time since entering the void, faint particles glimmered outside the windows. Tiny blue lights floating like bioluminescent dust. They shimmered with a soft pulse, perfectly synchronized with the void's rhythm. Dr. Marin studied them in awe. These aren't dust particles," she whispered. "They're charged clusters, structured. They're responding to something." The particles gathered around the ship, forming slow, spiraling trails, like curious organisms drawn to warmth. They didn't collide with the hull. They moved with precision, bypassing the ship in graceful arcs, almost as if scanning it or welcoming it. For a moment, the crew forgot the fear. The void suddenly felt alive in a way that didn't threaten but invited. Yet the deeper they drifted, the clearer the pulses became, now powerful enough to vibrate the floor beneath their feet. It no longer felt like a distant heartbeat. It felt close, immediate, echoing through their bones like the pulse of an enormous creature slumbering in the depths. Then something strange happened. The lights inside the ship dimmed again, but this time they didn't return to full brightness. Instead, a faint blue tint washed over everything. The ship's artificial lighting had synced with the ambient glow outside, completely on its own. Electrical systems weren't malfunctioning, they were adapting. The void was influencing their technology. No one could explain how. Jalen Rhee checked the instruments again. Electrical conductivity is increasing. The void isn't draining power, it's supplying it. Our systems are being harmonized. The word unsettled everyone. Harmonized by what? As they drifted further, the gravitational tides grew more rhythmic, like slow breathing. The space around them stretched in waves, then contracted gently. The crew could feel it, not physically, but as a subtle change in pressure inside their minds, like an instinctual feeling humans weren't built to have. Elise Marin closed her eyes and steadied herself. "I feel like it's communicating." Captain Aaron turned sharply. "With who?" "With everything," she whispered. Another pulse swept through the void, stronger, clearer. This time, the ship's internal sensors triggered automatically, producing a visualization on the main display. What appeared on the screen silenced everyone. It was the shape, the same colossal silhouette they glimpsed for an instant outside the veil, but now the distortion formed more clearly, like the outline of a mountain emerging from a storm. It shifted slowly, moving with a weight that bent space around it. If the Milky Way were a coin lying on your palm, this shape would be a continent. It wasn't an object. It was a presence. The distortion pulsed again, and every surface in the ship hummed. The blue particles outside swirled faster, circling the ship like galaxies orbiting an unseen center. The crew watched them in a trance, as if witnessing something sacred unfold. No alarm sounded, no threats appeared. Yet instinct screamed that they were standing before something far older than stars. Something that had watched galaxies rise and fall like flickers of dust. The ship drifted closer until the distortion filled the entire viewport. Patterns in the darkness shifted like enormous tendrils of gravitational mass, coiling and uncoiling with slow intention. It was impossible to tell if the thing was alive, or if it was a structure built by something even greater. Then, for the first time, they saw light. A single, distant spark bloomed within the silhouette. Not a star, something brighter, purer, bluish-white, like a cosmic lantern igniting in total darkness. The light expanded slowly, forming a ring, then a spiral, illuminating parts of the shape. Everyone on the ship instinctively leaned back. Their hearts pounded. The scale of the thing became clearer. It wasn't one structure, it was many. A network of colossal gravitational towers stretching across millions of light years, all connected by luminous filaments. The structure pulsed like a brain made of galaxies. Each pulse sent waves of light traveling down the filaments. The void wasn't empty. It was a megastructure, a cosmic organism, a living architecture stretching across hundreds of millions of light years, breathing, thinking, watching. Dr. Marin's voice was barely above a whisper. We're inside something's neural system. This entire void is a mind. Before anyone could respond, the next pulse hit, not violent, but overwhelming, filling the ship with a sensation halfway between sound and emotion. For a brief moment, every person aboard felt the same thing, a presence aware of them, curious, ancient, and suddenly very, very awake. The void pulsed again, stronger, closer, as if answering a question humanity had never asked. And the crew of Helios 2 realized with chilling clarity they had not discovered the void. The void had discovered them.
I didn't sleep after the sky spoke. Who could? How do you close your eyes when the universe has finally admitted it's been watching you? By morning, everything felt wrong. The air tasted metallic. Birds were silent. Even the wind refused to move, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I kept replaying that single word on my shattered phone screen. Prepare. Prepare for what? I didn't have an answer. But Chapter 5 begins with the moment the Earth decided to give me one. It started slowly. A soft vibration under my feet, so gentle I thought it was my imagination. But then the glasses on the shelf rattled. A picture frame fell, and the floorboards groaned like the house was waking up from a nightmare. I froze. Because this wasn't an earthquake. It didn't roll or shake. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Thump. Pause. Thump. Longer pause. Thump. The earth wasn't trembling randomly. It was communicating, the same way the sky had. My lungs tightened. My knees felt weak. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but where? There was no direction that felt safe anymore. The vibration grew stronger, rising like something enormous was climbing up from beneath the surface. Each pulse sent dust raining from the ceiling. Furniture shifted. My shelves leaned forward as though gravity had changed its mind. Then, silence. A silence so deep it felt manufactured. I took one step toward the door, and that's when the crack appeared. A thin line tore across the ground in front of me, slowly, deliberately, as if someone was drawing it with a blade from beneath the earth. It didn't split like normal fractures. It opened in a perfect pattern, geometric and intentional. This wasn't nature. This was design. My chest tightened. My breath came in uneven bursts. I knelt beside the opening, even though every fiber in my body begged me not to. Inside, I didn't see dirt, or rock, or darkness. I saw light. Cold, blue, living light. The same color I'd seen pulsing through the clouds the night before.
It glowed like it was breathing, matching the same rhythm as the Earth's pulses. Thump. Glow bright. Thump. Dim again. I whispered to myself, barely hearing my own voice. What is happening? And for the first time, I got an answer. A sound rose from the crack. Not a voice. Not a word. A frequency. So deep it rattled my bones. So sharp it sliced through my thoughts. It wasn't meant for my ears. It was meant for my mind. My vision blurred. The walls swayed. Time felt like it stretched and folded around me. And in that distorted moment, a message formed inside my head. Not spoken, not written, imprinted. A warning that felt like it was coming from somewhere far beneath the earth, or far beyond it. It has begun. The crack snapped shut. The light vanished. And the heartbeat of the earth stopped. But the message stayed burning in my skull, echoing long after the silence returned. Whatever was happening to the sky, whatever was rising from below, it had finally started.